What's going on, animators? Aaron here from CG Riff, and pleased to welcome you all to episode 13 of the CG Riff Animation Podcast. And you all are in for a treat today. We have as our special guest, Miss Morgan Greene is here, and we're really excited to hear about her story and her journey. Morgan's been in the industry for a number of years. She's been all over the place at studios like Pixar, Disney, DreamWorks, Sony, Animal Logic, all over, you name it. Most recently, she helped out over at Sunrise on their upcoming David film, and we're going to get into all of her journey and hear about all the things she has to share with you all today. So, Morgan, thank you so much for being here. We're excited to get into it with you. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I felt really honored when you reached out. And I've been following what you've been doing for, I feel like years now. But, when you reached out and I had checked out like some of the other people you interviewed, I was like, you asked me to interview? But...
No, we're so pleased to have you, we think everybody's perspective is important here, and I find that viewers benefit from hearing from a wide range of backgrounds and journeys, and so I know that this will be a great episode. So glad to have you. Let's get right down to it. I like to take people all the way back, right? We like to start at the beginning. Where did you grow up? Like, where were you born and raised, and how did you kind of find your way into animation? Did art play a big part of your childhood, and what was that kind of journey like, finding your way into the industry?
Well, I'm one of the few original Florida breds and OGs. I'm from Ocala, Florida. And I kind of fell into animation. I didn't quite know what I was getting into, which is probably a good thing, because I probably would have said no if I knew beforehand. But, as any girl growing up in the 80s or late 80s, early 90s, the Disney Renaissance movies were like, ingrained in our soul. And the old like Disney intro, the flat blue and white Disney intro, I always associated it with Little Mermaid because that was like the first one that I remember ever watching. And just my 5-year-old like never died. And I always loved, even now, I love like good stories and fun things. Like I love a good RPG game with a good story and just great fantasy worlds and getting lost in them. So I wanted to be an actress in 9th grade. And within one semester, I realized that was not for me as an actress. And I happened to get into art as an accident, or an art class by accident. I had chose TV production for an easy A, and it got full. And I happened to start getting good at art while I realized, or getting into art. And Ringling came and showed some senior thesis. I was like, well, I'm kind of enjoying art, and this is dealing with computers, so it could be fun. No idea what I was getting into. And I had only applied to Ringling, which in hindsight was probably a bad idea. But so I got into Ringling and kind of find out you're acting with a computer. And so that's kind of how I started. Getting into animation, and my 5-year-old gets to live on.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm of that same generation, and those late 80s, early 90s films, just like, I literally know every word, every music note to like forward and backwards. Like just wore out the VHS tapes or whatever. Like, Alan Menken is my godfather basically, or whatever. Awesome. So what was the, I guess, response like? Was your family kind of, I guess, supportive or like encouraging of like this career path? I know I've talked to some artists who are like, oh, my parents like, get a real job or whatever. Or was there any sort of pushback, or was it pretty smooth in terms of your path in that way?
It's pretty funny because my mom still today will joke about or talk about how she's a little sore that I came in. Well, all right, let me go back because I got a little ahead of myself, but I used to ride horses when I was in like middle school, and my mom was a huge horse person, as anyone from Central Florida will probably know. So one day I couldn't deal. I don't do well with heat, and I told Mom, I'm like, Mom, I just can't do the summer heats. I think I want to do animation, and I never got on another horse. And she was like so mad. She's like, I'm supposed to have a horse riding daughter. Oh my gosh! But she was really kept quiet about it and let me go do my own thing and was really supportive and really helped me get through Ringling. And she was a big part of why I think I was able to have the success that I did, because she kind of helped me get through college where I didn't have to work. So that was a huge privilege and advantage that I
Yeah.
had.
Awesome. Awesome. So I know I'm a SCAD grad myself, but I know obviously a ton of Ringling folks. And I know the program there really focuses on filmmaking, like the entire process. So, people make their senior thesis and they've kind of made their rigs and the models and like kind of touched all the parts of the process. How did you find, having maybe not done a lot of those things, what was that kind of journey through Ringling like for you? Did you enjoy that approach, or, were there things that really spoke to you?
Well, I'll never forget the moment that they opened up the UV layout and how you had to lay out UVs. And I went, what did I get myself into? But they definitely make a generalist out of you at Ringling. And I'm glad that I was able to kind of touch every bit of the process, because when I helped with, say, certain freelance projects and they needed more someone to pick up, or me to pick up certain areas, or like, especially at Sony, like I feel like you do 5 jobs at Sony. You're a modeler, you're a camera person, you're layout, you're a rigger kind of with the tools and stuff. So like having that experience allowed me to probably have more success at like Sony than, because I know some people would are like, you want me to touch a camera? You want me to move a camera?
Oh. Yeah.
Right? And they get scared, which is really not that daunting, but so I'm definitely glad that I had that experience.
Awesome. So, what was your, I guess, path like from like transition from student to the industry? Were you able to find work pretty quick upon graduation, or did you do internships along the way, or like how did that kind of transition go for you?
So I say I had the best of luck and the worst of luck, and so I was graduated in 2009, and I was still in the running for Disney and Pixar internships. And we did the official graduation. And then a couple days later, I get a rejection email from Pixar. Mm. And then, so I'm like, okay, well, I guess that's it. And regrouping and hoping that maybe Disney will come through. And then the very next day, I get a call from the Pixar recruiter. And she's like, well, this is awkward. Do you still want to come? I was like, what? Serious? So apparently, I don't know if you know him, but Andy, I'm brain on his last name. Yes, I think. Yeah. So we were just really hit it off in the interview, and it's kind of funny because we even like talked about the weather and stuff. And I went and told my teacher, "You talked about the weather with Andy in your interview." But like, apparently I was the first year or the second year that they started upping the intern numbers, because before it was traditionally 2. And then Kat Hicks, which she was one of the first years I did 6. And then Andy was like, we could have another seat. Why don't we take Morgan? And so they made a seat for me, which was crazy.
That's awesome.
And so I call or I email, because back then we were doing emails and stuff. And I emailed Disney saying, hey, I got Pixar. And it was more like, you want to take my name out of the running, I guess. But then like after I got the Pixar, 2 weeks in, I got a call from Disney being like, hey, do you want to come? Oh, and wow. I could go after my internship. And I swear this was like the hardest decision like of my life. And sometimes I still kind of think that maybe it was one of like, it was definitely a big junction in my life. And like, what if I made that other decision? But so at Ringling, I was probably the only person there that got into animation because of like Little Mermaid and Aladdin and like all those. Everyone else was Toy Story and, all the Pixar movies. I was there for Disney stuff. And I had been following Rapunzel for 5 years before then. And I knew that if I went, this would be like, I potentially, if everything went well, I could get to work with Glen Keane on a princess movie. So I'm probably the only person on the planet that would say, peace out, Pixar, I'm going over here.
Well, I mean that's a good tug of war to be caught between. You can do worse than that right out of school. But yeah, that's no,
Right?
I totally get it. I mean, and looking back on it, it's like yeah, I mean, Tangled holds a special place in my heart. It's such a good, well made, like high quality animation film, and getting to work with Glenn and Alan Menken songs and the whole deal. I think it's I think I would have trouble making that choice too. Yeah.
Right. And what 20-year-old or 21-year-old has the ability? And I was asking everybody. I was like, oh my God, I stress over it so much. And, you know, and the industry hadn't been affected yet. So, hindsight's always 2020 with how the industry went after. But
Yeah.
so I completed the internship and then I went to Disney and I got to work as a fixer on Tangled and I have a few small shots and stuff. I did a bit too well on hair. So I don't know if you remember, there's the hair shot where it wraps around the door and pulls when she's doing the light. So I did that shot. And after that, it was like, the hair girl.
The hair girl, yeah. Morgan. Yeah.
Right. And so that's when Princess and the Frog came out and then it tanked. And after that, everything changed. And so they changed the whole movie. And I think so after Tangled, they fired or laid off 60-70% of the staff. And 5 of us got hired to go to DreamWorks. We called ourselves the Disney Casualty of War. And I got to work with James Baxter on.
Man, you're really hitting all the greats right out the right out the gate.
My boyfriend jokes, he's like, "You just hit it out. You just peaked at the beginning. There's nowhere to go but down."
Yeah. Oh man.
I remember, I kind of skipped a little bit over my experience on Tangled, and if you want, we can kind of go a little more into that at some points and stuff. But I remember doing or fixing a hair falling shot from the tower. I don't remember if it was the first or the second one because you see it twice. But I remember going to Glenn in his office and being like, "What do you think, Glenn? I'm not worthy." And watching him draw over draw over shots in dailies and even have some of my own shots get drawn over. I think that was such a great first experience to get, learn appeal and stuff. Not that you don't already, but I think that really taught me how you push 3D to get that 2D appeal. And for me, it was right in my wheelhouse anyways, because I think about animation in a 2D way. So, I look back at how that steered my animation sensibilities, I guess, and how I look at things going forward.
So had you done 2D animation during your time at Ringling or in high school or anything, or you just kind of, you just mean that you kind of think about it more graphically like that?
I think about it very graphically, and and we did do. I think we just did one test. We did the standard ball bounce in 2D, but they had us do the flour sack walking, and I remember drawing it, and the drawings weren't too bad, but I was like, "Oh, this is really cool. You can do the squash and stretch, and have a lot of fun with how it goes across the page and stuff." And we did do an animal walk. We did do a quadruped walk drawing, and I think we did a regular biped walk as well, and that was it. And then it's 3D. You don't even really touch 3D until, I guess, second term of sophomore year, if at Ringling.
Okay.
So
cool.
So I did have a little bit of 2D experience, if you consider that. I would totally be a 2D. I still wish I could be a 2D animator, and that it was back in the 90s and. But
yeah, I always tell people that I think of animation in kind of a 2D way as well. That's why I kind of pride when you asked or when you mentioned that. But we did some 2D animation at SCAD, but I was never very good at it. My draftsmanship isn't great, and it was hard for me to keep stuff on models, so my characters would always be just swelling and changing size from frame to frame. But as I think about my 3D animation, I do think about it very graphically, and what's on the screen is most important in terms of how I approach it. But yeah, okay, great. So you're at So things are changing. The industry's changing. You said, I guess, a number of you guys migrated over to DreamWorks. What
Mm-hmm.
was that like? What was the transition like? I mean, I guess Disney was Disney using Maya at the time on Tangled, or were
Yeah.
this was that okay?
Yeah.
So that was already in your wheelhouse. So
Yeah.
when you transitioned to DreamWorks, did you have to learn? I'm assuming it was emo at the time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what was
Yep.
that kind of jump like to like proprietary software and a totally different studio, a third studio, in I don't know how not that long of a span.
It was really cool because it was some of my friends from Disney went over, and so it wasn't that hard of a transition, and I made a lot of new people. It was kind of interesting because I was only like one of 3 girls out of 120 animators there, so it
Wow.
was definitely a boys' club, and I learned to be one of the boys, and it never really bothered me. And it was such a great experience in terms of while I was there, everything was smooth, and I didn't work any overtime. We got free food. Everything was just so chill, and it was such a contrast, and it felt like an oasis because um Disney was in very much a weird spot on Tangled, and it was in a transformative period, and also I think being part of the Fix crew, that it was just a different feel. So there was a lot of stress just from the movie. If you remember, everyone was all about Pixar before Tangled, and I don't want to say Disney was like a laughing stock in 3D, but it wasn't really where people were like, let's go.
Yeah.
And they were, and much to like the leadership at Disney, which was at leadership on, or for the most part, the leadership and the main people on Tangled are the ones steering Disney animation now, but they really managed to pick up the quality and get Disney to where it is now. But it was in that transformative period, and so the vibe just wasn't relaxed, and so to go to DreamWorks where everyone's chill and happy, and like we're just vibing, doing our shots, and it was amazing then. And I always said I wanted to go back. That was always where I wanted to try to get back to.
So what project was that on when you went over there?
Crudes.
Cruise. Okay. The first one. Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
The very first one.
Yeah. That's I mean that's already an incredible journey that I don't know at this point how many years out of school you are, but probably not a lot. You've already gone to like 3 of the biggest studios there are, basically, like right away. So you've kind of seen them all and can kind of take your pick, I guess, at this point in terms of like which culture, that it was interesting that you touched on that. And as part of the reason I definitely wanted to have you on is, as you mentioned, in general, this industry for a long time has been quite a bit of a boys club. The numbers aren't great, especially in CG animation. And so even with my podcast, I try to be aware, like I don't want to just have like 50 guys come through, because there's obviously women doing amazing things, and all sorts of folks who are just contributing to all these films that everybody loves. So it's important to me make sure we're representing as many voices as possible. But it's interesting to have gotten kind of a behind the scenes peek at the different cultures. And to your point, those cultures do change, and studios are at their heyday versus when they're kind of struggling and trying to find their way or trying to find their voice or whatever it is. But I'm glad you found a great experience during your time at DreamWorks. So what was I guess how long were you there, and what was, I guess, the impetus for leaving there? Or was it just like a crewing down that happened next, or like how long did you stay, and what was the next kind of step?
Well, it's pretty funny because I was only there for 6 months, so I was technically only on cruise for 4, because training, because it's Menby, you have like 2 months training.
Yeah.
And so I was on cruise for 4 months, and I had like 3 acting shots. A couple of little things. This was like my first official actual animation gig, and I was only on there for 4 months, but basically I think it was Kung Fu Panda 3 that came out, and it tanked. And my when you got to DreamWorks back in the day, you thought you were set. You were like, I'm a lifer, I'm done. And I even put in an offer on a little studio apartment, which was like $150K, which was crazy. So I thought I was crazy at the time, but now I'm like, do you think I'm crazy?
You wish. Yeah.
but like I was so like, you thought you were so set when you go to DreamWorks. You're like, oh, I'm here, and so I was like, all right, I'm going to buy something. And they made that decision 2 weeks before the option was up. So I don't know if you know how much their contracts were, but it was a 3-year contract, but it had options at 6 months, a year, and a year and a half.
Oh, okay.
And only they can act on the options. And they made the decision 2 weeks before. So if they made it 2 weeks later, after my thing, I might have still been a DreamWorks lifer, maybe. But so all of us that got hired, all of us that started around that time, all got laid off.
Mm.
So,
had you already closed on the condo or whatever, or that was just in the process?
I lost it by like 2K on the bid, which I'm like, oh.
That's good.
I don't know if that was a good or bad thing, because now I would have a.
Yeah, I know, it was probably worth $1 million now. Yeah.
Right. So, which and I remember James Baxter calling me into his office and saying, I feel so bad for you. I prefer, I look at people coming on my show versus you, and I want you on my show rather than some of them coming on. And at the time, I'm 21, I didn't know much, and it didn't hit me just what he meant until after. But I was then in a weird middle ground of like, I didn't have a lot of experience, and I didn't qualify for training. And then I think he knew that I was going to struggle because there were so many layoffs going on that I was up against thousands of experienced animators with 5 or more films under their belt. So like, as a recruiter, who are you going to pick? You know? So that's what happened at the end of DreamWorks, basically.
Okay. Yeah. That stuff's always like, it's so unfortunate. It's heart-wrenching, especially when you have like you say you finally feel like everything's falling into place and you kind of see a future there and all of that, and then the rug kind of gets pulled out. And we've had obviously a year like that very much this past year, right? We're all over the place. People are people with a fair bit of experience, or even people with a whole lot of experience, are kind of finding themselves in like this weird spot, like this what now type of thing. So yeah, I know that those types of crossroads are definitely, demoralizing to say the least. So what was your kind of, I guess, how did you find the industry after that? What was your next kind of like period like?
Well, I was looking back, because you even asked that time. So I was on at Disney for about 10 months, and then I went to DreamWorks for 6. So I only had a little over a year of actual industry experience. And after that, I was going to go work with Aaron Blaise on Timbo. I think. I don't know if you heard of that.
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah.
And then the week I was going to have the interview, and I'm like, well, I met Aaron Blaise at Disney before they let him go. And I was like, yeah. I mean, I had gotten an email like 2 hours or like an hour after I applied. So I was like, okay. And me and my mom drove down there, and we were going to look at the area because it's in Florida. And of course, she wants her baby in Florida. And so she actually within that week already like rented an office space because she was going to go do work down there. And then after that, my friend sent me a link going, well, ... and it was Digital Domain goes bankrupt or files bankruptcy.
Oh, man.
And then my dad started getting sick and stuff. And, I think the whiplash was a lot. And like a 21-year-old, maybe he's not the best equipped mentally to handle all of that, at the time, it's definitely more normal or common in the industry now to bounce between the big studios. But back then, I don't think it was very common at all. And I also, hitting the big 3 out of the gate, I guess I got a little bit of I don't want to say too big of a head or anything, but you're like, you have like certain standards for the jobs you'll take.
I get it.
You're not going to just take any little thing. You expect you're going to get back, or I don't know. And I also didn't have a mentor then. And when I, couldn't get back to the big studios at the time, I ended up staying in Florida, helping take care of my dad and being with my dad and actually freelancing stuff for like 8 years.
Okay.
And then I started doing I started doing like video work because a lot of my creative agency that I ran and owned, it was more focused on branding and creative work. It was design and all kinds of stuff. And when I started doing video work, like the bug just immediately came back. And like within like 4 or 5 months, I was like, I want to get back into animation. I think I'm going to do this. And, I even debated on like when I came back or I decided to venture back into it, was like, do I even admit this? Because maybe it's not this way now, but I almost felt like back then, like you had to be like a true artist or anything. And if you just left or came back, like, are you like really true, like a true animator or whatnot? And I started thinking about it, I'm like, I think it shows how much I loved it, that like it was such a painful thing that you almost have to go cold turkey or something to like it was that hard. And since I went through that, I told you I tried to be a voice for people going through it now. And like when the Netflix stock dropped, I knew it was coming. I was like, here we go, get ready. To some of the younger animators at Sony, and they're like, nah. And then they like message me like, you are right.
Yeah, you knew how to see the writing on the wall. I mean, and a lot of times, we kind of have that optimism that we're just like, but those of us, who've been around for a while, obviously we know this stuff goes in cycles, and you kind of learn to see the signs of how investors freak out and start pulling stuff and canceling projects and all of that. And it does tend to kind of go in waves. But that's thank you for being so vulnerable and so kind of honest about how that experience played out for you, because I do think there are people out there who I'm sure struggle with that. It's like you achieve these incredible highs right out of the gate, and kind of like you mentioned, right, it's kind of nowhere to go but down. And it does sort of, if several different people have confirmed that, oh, you're playing at this level and you're a fefeature film animator, then it is hard to just go take like the little no name gigs wherever. I would imagine my path was very much the opposite. I started I did every little no name gig for a number of years before I kind of reached that feature level. But when people are kind of getting the prestige internships and they're having to choose between two different ones because everybody's clamoring over you. I understand what that probably does to a young mind in terms of thinking that, okay, I've arrived, I'm here now. Who's gonna take me in, and where can I find my future? And then like I say, when that rug gets pulled out, that's got to be really difficult. And add to that, family, health issues and all these other things going on, and that's really like a roller coaster of highs and lows. So good on you for weathering that storm, and like you say, kind of stepping back, but then finding that the passion kind of drew you back to that first love anyway. Really does solidify that I mean, you're in the right place, and that you in this industry are for the better or for worse, for the highs and lows, right? There's something that keeps kind of bringing you back. So we're the better for it, and we're glad that you're back. So you're running, I guess, your own agency, doing freelance work from Florida, right? For a number of years, for the 8 years you mentioned, right? What is that actual kind of like foot back in the door? Like when did you know you were ready, and how did that come about to like get back in the saddle, as it were?
Well, I had been thinking about it, and then a friend, Joe Mandia, I didn't know him at the time, but he added me on LinkedIn. He was like, hey, how's it going? And we started talking, and he was talking about freelance. And he just helped encourage me and got me to just get back in, because I was like, no way. I mean, I've been out for 8 years. No way I'm getting back in. And but yeah, I applied to it was a recruiting agency for real effects, and I got hired for Rumble. Okay. Right. And they were like, this is Thursday, and they're like, we need you Monday. And I'm like, well, I have an apartment and everything I have. I mean, I don't know if I can be there Monday, maybe the following Monday. So they rushed me out. And then they were like, well, Rumble got delayed. Can you help finish Scoop? And
so is this in Montreal? Like, they needed you up there?
No, actually Texas.
Texas, okay.
So I actually ended up going and helping in their Texas stylist studio.
Okay.
And so I was helping finish Scoop, and so I poor Bill Haller, he wasn't even asked if uh, if he wanted us or anything. We got shoved on him, and he's like, "What do I do with these people?" And it's the last 2 months. Almost everything has been casted, and like he doesn't know me. I've never done cartoony stuff before, and so I feel kind of bad for the position he was put in. But so I helped for 2 months, and I did like 3 shots or whatever, and they got cut basically. And then I get a message, like, well, we don't really need you on Rumble anymore, so thank you for the 2 months. Bye bye. And I'm like, my luck continues. Can I just get on a film and just like finish? Because I got cut early on the prudes, and like I was like, oh man, what is with my luck in this industry? And so I go back to the drawing board, and I'm like, COVID starts. This is like February of COVID, and I told my mom, and I'm like, you know what? I didn't keep the faith last time. I didn't have a mentor or anyone, which I should have gotten a mentor back then. But I'm like, you know what? If I could tell myself back then, keep the faith and go. I packed up my car. I drove from Dallas to LA, rented an apartment, and just waited it out. And then I got an interview for Sea Beast. And so I came back, and Sea Beast, I guess I say, is like my first foray back into it. And that was such a great experience as well. I'm super lucky that I got on Sea Beast, and I got kind of known as the subtle animator, which I kind of almost attribute to my Pixar internship.
Yeah.
I had kind of a funny story about a subtle shot I had to do there that Michael McCary helped me with. And then they liked me, and I got on Spider-Verse 2. And then I left Spider-Verse 2 because they were keeping me as a mid and paying me that pretty much an unaffordable wage that I just couldn't live on with inflation and everything. And Animal Logic was like, can you come over for like twice the money and you'll be a senior? And I'm like, should I leave the Spider-Verse 2? But and I went over on Leo, and I worked with Jason Figliosi. And then
was all of this is during the pandemic, so was all of this remote?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. But I'm in Vancouver this whole time.
Okay.
So I get on Leo as a senior, and I work with Jason Figliosi, and he really liked my work. And I didn't notice until after, but he recommended me to get on Wish at Disney. So everything kind of came full circle.
Yeah.
And I got back, and it was kind of like almost like I guess it maybe was a little bit of I needed to prove to myself that it wasn't just my skill on why I got like laid off from Disney and DreamWorks, and that I had what it took. Like, I grew up in Florida, so we had this whole like bootstraps, your own, it's your own, you make your own destiny kind of thing. So I always kind of blame myself, but it was kind of a good validation for myself that, I have what it takes when I got back on Wish.
Yeah.
And sorry, I don't know if I should have gone through the whole thing like this.
No, that's the journey, right? That's the I always tell people, it's the not the destination, it's the journey. And so, no, I loved it. Hitting every step along the way, I think is makes a lot of sense to do. And there's so many kind of nuggets of inspiration in there, and then also kind of cautionary tales even or whatever, right, along the way. So no, I think that's great, and I think it is a great story that you ended up kind of full circle and on another. Well, not a princess movie, but another kind of musical Disney 100th anniversary film or whatever. It didn't do particularly well, of course, but it's good. Like you say, it validates your skills that, okay, this wasn't a fluke. Here I am a number of years later and still, Disney caliber or whatever. So that's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just did not expect to have, when I decided to get back in, I honestly did not expect to have such I guess I would kind of consider a quick rise back into it, but and maybe it was like just the right time. Like if I had come in a year later, or if I come in a year sooner, that maybe I wouldn't have had the same trajectory to have that path, because it was all of the streaming content was hot, and there were so many jobs. Like the studios couldn't find people, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And
now,
now it's the complete opposite. Like right
it's
now. Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and like, my joke is I left for the recession, I came back for the depression, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Timing,
that's my joke.
timing is so fickle, and it's kind of like to your earlier point, right? It's like it's easy to internalize, like, oh, was it me and whatever. But this industry is so fickle, and the timing is everything. It's
Yeah.
like luck really does. Luck and timing play such a big part in it. And, obviously you have to be
Yeah.
ready and have the skills and stuff. But there's times when like they're hiring like crazy, and you can't put enough people in the seats. And other times when people with like ridiculous amounts of experience, they're like just getting crickets, and it's like, well, what's
Yeah.
going on? But
Like,
yeah.
yeah. And I'm so surprised at how bad it's gotten now. I can officially say, like, when Netflix stock dropped, I knew it was coming, but I did not realize it would get this bad. And I guess there's several. It's like a trifecta, right? We had the stocks drop, and then so there's a bunch of pullback, but we also had the writer strike, and then you have AI that I think is somewhat. I don't know if it's officially lowered the numbers of people being hired, but I think it's definitely kind of a play, and there's so many good people. And all the interviews I have, like these small studios are like, I can't believe we're getting Pixar and Disney and DreamWorks people trying to.
And it's funny because it's like you
They're
mentioned
eating
before.
good.
Even when you were like a young kid, you already kind of had that feeling of like, oh, I'm Disney, DreamWorks, Pixar caliber. And it's like now I'm taking these interviews for these like little places. But now, there's literally people with 20 years of Pixar experience who are like just getting anything they can take, which is it's pretty crazy, and it's gotten pretty bleak out there. Obviously, I don't like the tone of this podcast to be that doom and gloom, but we do keep it real around here. But this is about putting light out into the world and inspiring people. But the fact that things do tend to go in waves does give me some hope that that we'll ride this low, and then things will be on the upswing at some point. But I don't like to give false hope. But I think there's there is something definitely cyclical about how these things go.
Yeah. And I tell my students, I'm like, it might seem like kind of bad now, but that just means you might be able to ride that wave up, ride that wave back up, because it is going to have another peak. And maybe, I mean, I don't know. I know Disney, we had kind of a good peak with like Baymax and like Zootopia. And there was like kind of like a bit of a period there, but I don't know if people consider it being like another renaissance. And I'm like, I feel like we're coming into maybe due for a nice renaissance where there's like just that magic crew that accumulates somewhere, whether it's Pixar or Disney or probably an indie studio, right, doing something cool.
Yeah.
And like where it just opens our imaginations again, like the Little Mermaid and stuff there, where people like fall in love with animation. And I hope that, I mean, this is what I was telling you, like why I was kind of excited to come, because I've had veteran friends that have felt the way or deal with the struggles I had the first time around. Because now I'm like sending like the meme first time to people and everything. And now it's like water off a duck's back for me. Like I knew it was coming, and like, or, I can accept rejection now, and it doesn't really bother me. And I don't take it as like my own shortcomings now. And I don't lose my confidence. I guess maybe having a mentor back then could have helped me say, don't let it make you, or let it get to your confidence. And maybe that's what a lot of people do. Like even now I get rejections, right? Like I couldn't get, some of us interviewed for Disney Vancouver and we didn't get it, but we got the OG. So we kind of joked about that, rejections happen a lot. And, it's, not always the talent, right?
Yeah, it's important not to internalize that stuff or let it break your spirit, because sometimes things just don't align, or the timing's not there, or just somebody vibed better than you did or whatever, and it's not always going to be the right fit. And there is definitely a surplus in supply versus demand right now, but I'm hoping that those things will shift. Things that do bode well. So there's kind of like you mentioned with like the stocks, like when the stocks tank, everybody kind of gets scared and starts pulling money out of stuff, and then when there's when a project just hits and is really special and everyone gets like excited about animation again, whether it's a Spider-Verse or Arcane or whatever, and then a lot of other studios start looking and like, whoa, can we make something like that? And then when there are huge financial successes like Inside Out 2 or something like that, and people are like, oh, maybe there is still money in the theaters or whatever. Hopefully that starts greenlighting, that starts the buzz at least that it takes to kind of get the machine turning again. But I think there are, like you say, a lot of factors right now at play that have really kind of ground the machine to a halt in a really kind of heartbreaking way. But I like to try to hold on hope that there's a brighter tomorrow, however long it takes. But it is really good perspective that you have, having gone through it and kind of knowing how that goes, and then even figuring out how to navigate it in that kind of down period where you kind of pivoted to some other things and you took skills you already had and kind of figured out how to monetize or how to offer something of value to people that still hopefully spoke to your creative spirit or whatever it was. So I good on you for being a survivor and for having that perspective now, even as the world's kind of crumbling around us. You kind of know what it is, at least, right?
Yeah. I hope I can be a testament to people that things will get better and that you can get through it, and I do have some kind of things, because it can be a little weird, because like when I came back in, and it's such a small industry, every project I'm with people I worked with, every project, and some of them I started with and now they're leads or soups or something, and I'm like, oh man, if I had just stuck with it. And I felt like it's funny, at first I felt like I was maybe a little bit, I don't want to say bratty or whatnot, but like, and like, but hearing like some veterans have the feelings I felt, it was almost, I want to say therapeutic, but it made me feel better about what I went through back then, and that maybe I wasn't just bratty.
Yeah, I mean, there's people underneath. There's people behind this work, and animators, artists. We tend to be sort of sensitive souls, whatever. Right? But
right?
So it's like this stuff it does hurt, and it is scary, and it does affect you and the people around you, and it's hard not to take it personally and to connect it to your work or your output or whatever it is. It's just really it's. Yeah, it's tough, but yeah, I'm glad that like you're saying you're hearing now from people who are much older, much more mature, or whatever than you were at the time. Feel the same way, because it's like at the end of the day, we're people. We love this thing. We want to be out there doing it at a high level, and when that's taken from us, it's like where does that leave you, and what does that do to your soul, your spirit, or whatever. But okay, let me pivot, because I don't want it to get too dark. Right? You mentioned teaching before. How did that come about? When did you start teaching? And have you enjoyed sort of expressing your talents in that way?
Yeah. To be honest, I actually started teaching to help my own self sharpen my skills back. I was like, oh, what better way to get the rust off, so to say.
Sure.
And then I ended up coming to find that I loved seeing the students grow. And, like when you see a student that's passionate, like, so you teach and you help. So I'm sure you had this experience. You see someone and you see that like light that like you had when you were in there or something.
Yeah.
And you just see them like, they're just bursting with passion for it. And they're eager to like hear what you have to say and help them. And then you see them grow. It's really rewarding. And I've been lucky to have students get to every studio pretty much, and I got to work with a student on Wish, and it's really fulfilling, I think.
That's awesome. Yeah, it really does. It helps sharpen your own eye, like you say, with knocking off the rust. It keeps you honest, like it keeps you proper. Like you got to know what you're talking about to give notes and stuff, and to lead them in the right way. But yeah, it is just so gratifying, to watch them succeed and watch them get it and have those aha moments and stuff. It's funny, actually. I've been mentoring for a number of years, but one of the first guys I kind of took under my wings a number of years ago, he actually got to Pixar long before I did, and he like shot into the stratosphere, like and I was like a proud dad, like when he got the Pixar internship back in like 2013 or something, and it would be many years before I joined him there. But yeah, it's awesome to get to work with your former students and things like that. It's really
right.
It just feels so good to kind of give back and even to I like teach, but I also like mentor and coach, right? And so it's like helping people navigate through these difficult times, like, right, it's like letting them know that, okay, it's going to be okay, and this is how it goes sometimes, and these are the ups and downs and all of that, because right
Mm-hmm.
now people are just looking for a little hope, but also like honest, just like leveling, do am I good enough to
Mm-hmm.
do this, do I have what it takes, like level with me, that type of thing. And yeah, being able to kind of serve in that capacity, for me has been really rewarding. So I'm glad to hear that that you're connected to the community in that way too, because you have so
Yeah.
much experience and so much of like a unique perspective to guide them, in that way. And this is something you mentioned a couple times, kind of wishing you had had yourself, right, earlier on, having that mentorship. It means so much, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that's awesome. Let's
Yeah,
let's
exactly.
let me get into some like specifics, right? To give some
Okay.
kind of tangible, I guess, animation feedback, right? What are some of like your favorite types? You mentioned before, like you became kind of like the subtle shot animator, but what are like some of your favorite types of shots to do? And which types of shots do you find like particularly challenging that maybe don't like to do?
Um, so at first I wasn't quite into singing shots, and I had noticed a trend like 3, 4 years ago where so many students were doing like these singing shots, and I'm like, I got a little worried that like they were pandering to Disney a little bit and
Yeah,
whatnot with them. But now, like now that I've been on a few musicals, I would love a good musical shot, and and I got to do a good musical shot on David, and I'm like, man, um, there's just something about the life that you can bring into a shot, and with singing and this theater that you just maybe it's just because we don't generally usually get to do that. We just have to do straightforward acting and whatnot, and there's just that level of energy when you're singing that you can bring, and it elevates the song, right? So I don't know. I think that's where I've been tend or at least lately, that those kind of shots excite me and that I want more
yeah,
of, that I'm craving.
yeah,
But um and I'm a little scared of like I remember when I went on Spider Verse because I got kind of typecasted and as a subtle shot animator, and I hadn't done hardly any real like physical action stuff. And I
yeah,
remember going to Spider Verse like, if I get like a big fighting shot or a big swinging shot and I got to do all this cool stuff, oh my god, am I going to be able to? And so, and I still haven't. I'm also cartoony. I've interviewed for several cartoony films, but I've never been able to get on a cartoony film. So like, I'm just really scared about like those proper in betweens and like, you know.
yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah, that's good to hear. I find I'll read the comments sometimes on episodes and stuff, and people are always like, I think it's comforting to them to know that like just because someone's like a high level animator and has worked on all these films and all these credits and stuff doesn't mean that we're like all great at everything. Like there's something that scares all of us, and that's good for them to hear, right? It's like, yeah, please don't give me this type of shot. I'm not sure what to do with this. Yeah, so no, that's great, and it takes a village to make these things, and it's like having a team
Yeah.
that's robust enough to handle, and it's on the soups or whatever to cast it out appropriately and find the people who kind of
Yeah.
play to their strengths to get it done and make it look great. But okay, awesome. That's good. Let's see. What what kind of, I guess, other goals and aspirations do you have? You mentioned you worked on helped on David recently. I guess there's a lot of, I guess, remote work that happens these days, which is great. But as you continue like in your career journey, hopefully you have many more years in the industry. Should you choose that, right? What other like aspirations and stuff do you have? Do you want to lead and soup and these other types of things? Do you hope to do that someday, or what are your other kind of things you're looking forward to?
I mean, I think I definitely would love to step into more leadership roles, more leading. I like helping guide like a shot with an animator and make that the best that they can. And and crafting stories, I've found myself really into, is it hitting that emotional impact? And sometimes it's about the animator pulling back, right? Like one shot needs to be more quiet and the animator is, going a little bit too far, and just crafting really good stories. But so I definitely am at a point where I want to step into that stuff, and I've interviewed for a few shots, or a few of those roles. Um, the other thing that I've been mostly thinking about how I do this is using my animation skills for some activism, maybe, and like um, some things that I'm passionate about. you know.
Yeah.
So hopefully, it's a little tricky because, I'm trying to think like you can put out a video on YouTube or something, but is it really going to have the impact you need? So like, where can you really get the bang for your buck? Like, where can you really maximize what you have to offer and really have effect? But
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
mm,
that stuff's challenging because it's like obviously new distribution channels have opened up, right? There's ways to get to just make your own stuff, make what you're passionate about, and get it to an audience. But it is tricky. It's not you can't like oversimplify it. You gotta if you need to monetize it and pay your bills and these types of things. That stuff becomes challenging sometimes. But no, that's
mm,
great that you are looking forward to certain things and still have goals that you'd love to achieve to keep keeps the passion alive and keeps us hungry doing this
yeah.
thing figuratively, not literally, I hope.
And particularly maybe mentor more women to get more women in
Yes.
animation and help rise up, you know.
Yeah, that's like I say, even putting out episodes like this, I had great conversation with Amy Smead last season and with Brenda Chapman, but even just bringing it like out of the clouds back down to we mere mortals and putting stories out, right, of maybe some
Right.
lesser known names, right, who are still out there doing great things but can inspire people. Sometimes I realize that a lot of times I have like all these kind of like big fish I'm hoping to like reel in because I would love to have a conversation with Glenn Keane and sit down and talk with him. And so it's like it was incredible to sit down and talk with James Baxter, but it's also so useful to just talk to to other peers and get perspectives and stories that maybe
Hmm.
people can connect to a little bit more. To again, we mere mortals
Yeah.
who aren't animation gods or whatever can maybe
Right.
be just as inspiring or more so, right, to students or people up and coming who are trying to find their way. Okay, awesome. What other types of things do you think you might have enjoyed doing with your life had you not got the animation bug and pursued this for so many years? Like, are there other things that you could have kind of seen yourself doing?
Actually, considered becoming a psychologist at one point, which
Okay,
I almost am
interesting.
like, maybe that's somewhat related to animation because we have to
Yeah,
understand people and like what
for
drives
sure.
people.
Yeah,
So I'm like, everything was related. I guess it's true. We're always drawn towards what we should, or
yeah,
gravitate towards what we should be.
yeah. Well, last episode, I was talking with Jeremy Schaefer from DreamWorks, and he yeah, as he was telling his story, whether he realized it or not, we were kind of like stitching together all the dots along the way. That it was like you had to be doing this, like that you were going to find your way to doing this, like one way or another. It's like everything like led to this in such like a unique sort of
Yeah.
serendipitous way. But yeah, I mean, obviously, yeah, psychology plays a huge part, especially at the feature level when we're just constantly like analyzing like character motivation and why did they do this and how would they react and does this feel truthful and what past traumas are influencing this choice and whatever. And so yeah, that's
Right.
good. That's interesting. Awesome. Let's see. So I think you kind of mentioned sort of along the way a little bit, but I'm going to double back to some of my earlier questions on my list as we're kind of coming to the close of our time in a bit. Who along the way? I know you mentioned not having one, maybe early enough, but who along the way were some of your mentors as you look back now that you kind of see shaped your journey?
I have to give the biggest credit to Keith Osborne back at Ringling, and because so there were 12 rock stars in my class, and I wasn't one of them.
Mm.
And I don't think that I was a definite underdog story. In fact, some were very mad when they heard I got Pixar. But
I was
um,
going to say, how underdog could you have been if you got both Pixar and Disney like
I know.
clamoring over you? I think you're being modest.
No, I was definitely not one of the 12 that everyone was. "Oh, did you see their latest stuff?" Like, no, I wasn't on anyone's radar. But
Okay.
I have to thank Keith so much for putting up with me because I was just hungry to like. I think, and I tell my students this: animation can be learned, but you just need the eye, and you gotta be willing to put in the work. If you have the instincts, you can learn it. And so, I mean, I guess I had kind of a sense of what should be on the screen, and I was just hungry, and I was literally sending him my like animation every night, and he would graciously give me a video and like talk to me about stuff, and I'm like, um, and he really invested in me and really took the time to help me, and I think that would really was a key thing that got me on the right trajectory in terms of learning animation. Obviously, my mom letting me where I can work, or not have to work while I was studying there, because And then Joe Mandia really kind of mentored me as I was getting back into animation. And so, and then my lead on Seabees, Joe Darko, which
Yeah.
is actually younger than me. I'm sure you know
I
Joe
know Joe, and
Darko,
he's
probably.
actually on my
Yeah.
short list to try to get on the podcast. So you might actually have him on later
Yeah.
this season.
Okay.
Yeah, he's on my list.
Okay. I'll message him to be like, go on. But like, he's younger than me, but he was so gracious and like helping me. And I don't think my journey back in animation, and I don't even think he even maybe necessarily knew that I was coming back in and maybe a little rusty, but he was very good about looking at animators and knowing their strengths and what to cast them. And he was like me, and this is where sometimes they can get you in trouble. I don't know what kind of mentor teacher you're like, but like I like I need encouragement, and this is why Keith was so good for me, because he would encourage and like, oh, you can do this, you got this, and then very calm and encouraging. And so I try to be that way with students, but sometimes students don't need that. They need maybe a little more of a drill sergeant, and they can go the wrong way when you're encouraging. But Joe was that encouraging, chill guy. Like, CBS was a bit hectic behind the scenes, not necessarily for his team, but it was because he was so good about protecting us and casting us right. And no matter how stressed he was, he always had a smile on his face. So we were all just chill, like, just doing our shots. And he really helped me get the rest off. He really helped me train my eye again, or get the rest off. And so I really attribute him to that as well.
Awesome. Yeah. And that's a good point, that everybody's kind of learning style is a little different, and understanding those needs. And I'll have people tell me even sometimes, because I do tend to be, pretty positive and uplifting, and I don't want to break anyone's spirits. But I've had people tell me before, it's like, you can go hard on me. It's kind of like when you're getting a massage, and they're like, do you want me to go deeper? And you're like, yeah, go to, hurt me, that type of thing. So, sometimes, people want the tough love, and other times they are already kind of in a fragile space, and they just need a little encouragement, right, to get there. So recognizing that in your different animators and being able to kind of guide them in that way is useful. And I suspect that your years of teaching will serve you well when you do move into leadership type positions, because there's a lot of, I assume, a lot of overlap in those types of skills and sensibilities. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's great. That's really good. I know that along every journey, there's always people who've poured into us. And so I always want to make sure to stop and acknowledge the mentors along the way, because that really does, help clear some of the obstacles out of our path, and at least kind of give us someone to lean on when maybe we're getting a little weak, or a little tired, or whatever it is. And so that's great to give those shout outs. Mm-hmm. Cool. Exactly. Well, Morgan, this has been really, really great. I think we touched on a lot of good stuff that's really kind of unique and specific to your perspective, which is what I was hoping for when I asked you on. So we're just so grateful for your time and for sharing of yourself and being, like I said, so open and vulnerable with us and with all the listeners. Let's just do a couple fun ones, just to wrap it up. Okay. Let's see. What's your spirit animal?
Oh, my spirit animal. I guess it would have to be a mermaid. Can it be a fantasy one?
There you go. Yeah, you brought it back full circle, right? You just sucked out the first Disney logo, we got Little Mermaid. That's funny. Okay,
I mean, maybe it's a Florida in me as well.
Yeah.
It's
no, beach, I see the little princess. Princess is behind you, and the tiny little animation desk is really, really cute.
Yeah. I even have when I was on Wish, I had Mark Henn draw me Ariel, and I have it signed by Jodie Benson and him. So I'm like,
oh wow, oh my goodness, oh wow. Okay, so again, I have my realistic list of like people I reach out to and hope to get, and then I also, like I say, have like the white whale, like Moby Dick, like list of people I'm trying to like get in. And Mark Henn would be great to have on. John Musker, like I have this list of people who are just like huge. Like I would just die if they answered back and said yes. But I'm going to keep working those angles and get them on here. I promise you guys, we're going to get them all one day.
This is what's so funny. I have to say this before we go. I did not intend this, I swear, but I had a Little Mermaid shirt I bought from the Disney store, and I had put it on that day. It was not I did not mean to, but I saw him in the hallway, and it was like, I'm going to be leaving Wish soon, and I'm really into Little Mermaid. And Kira said, "Can ask you if you would draw? I don't want to impose or anything." He's like, he looked at my shirt. He's like, "All right, I can tell." necessarily intended, but yeah, he was so gracious to give me that.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we're going to finish right on time, which I
Okay.
promised I'd get you out of here and be respectful of your time. But thank you so much again to you, Morgan, for your time and for sharing your story with all of us. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in and for being, sticking with us through our hiatus and now into our new season, which I'm hoping you're all enjoying. Be sure to like and subscribe. We've got many more great episodes coming. Send in your requests if you have people that come to mind that you think would make great episodes. We'll try to get in touch with them. Or if you have connections with people, send them my way. We're always looking to get new people in the hot seat. So thank you all again. And Morgan, take care of yourself. Everyone, good night.
Thank you. Bye. Bye. And thank you, Aaron.